The year is 2022. After surviving the long online winter of the pandemic, Super Smash Bros. Melee tournaments are back in full force at Genesisgg, the first true super major of the post-pandemic era. Fresh off a career-defining victory at Smash Summit 11 and a newly crowned #1 placement on the Melee Stats all-time top 100, Mango enters the tournament as the first seed, projected to win the entire event. But to claim victory, he'll need to run the gauntlet, navigating a bracket packed with the strongest players in the world. Before any of that can happen though, there's one small formality he needs to get through: open bracket pools. Mango sits down on stage to play his winner's round of 128 match. It's still early, far from the top 8, not even into the top 64, where the difficulty is typically expected to ramp up. A few Mango fans are scattered in the seats, casually watching in the hopes of seeing some flashy combos, but for the most part, nobody's really paying much attention. Why bother? Everyone knows how this is going to go. Looking ahead at the projected top 64 bracket, Mango is slated to play. Wait, his opponent just took the first stock. It's a Sheik player named ThisIsWeb? Apparently he's the best player in Colorado. Okay, interesting. ThisIsWeb is actually holding a solid lead, but it looks like Mango is starting to figure him out. Anyways, in round 1 of top 64, Mango will play. Wait, ThisIsWeb just took game 1. Okay, that's pretty impressive, but still, he has to win one more game to take the set, and game 2 goes exactly how we expect it to. Like a true top player, Mango is able to adapt, and he should clean it up from here. So, after KJH, Mango will need to face... Whoa, why is this still so close? Mango's on his last stock? There's no way.
So close right now.
Oh, gets the hard knockdown. And the forward air, he's off stage.
That actually just...
Oh my goodness.
That's it.
Mango
and
goes down 2-1 to ThisIsWeb.
One of the greatest Melee players of all time, and the one projected to win the entire tournament, just got sent to the loser's bracket by a Sheik player most people have never heard of, named ThisIsWeb. What just happened? Perhaps what we just witnessed was a breakout performance, the legendary rise of ThisIsWeb, who after slaying the #1 seed would go on to win the tournament and become Melee's next god. But no, actually, after defeating Mango, ThisIsWeb would proceed to lose all of his remaining sets. Meanwhile, it was Mango who tore through the loser's bracket, defeating incredibly skilled players set after set before finally being knocked out just shy of top 8. And while Fizz would go on to periodically claim the top spot in his home state of Colorado, he would never actually break into Melee's annual top 100 rankings, peaking instead at an honorable mention in 2019, a whole 3 years before Genesisgg even happened. Meanwhile, Mango would maintain a solid spot in the top 10 globally over the next few years, even making it as high as number 3. However you choose to look at it, Mango was and is the better player, both on that day and across time. Yet it was undeniable that such a legend of the game had still dropped a fair and honest set to an unranked player very few people knew about. How did this happen? Could it just be luck? Well, randomness isn't completely absent from competitive Melee. Peach's turnip pull is a perfect example. Most of the time, she plucks an ordinary turnip, a simple projectile with predictable properties, but on rare occasions, she can pull something far more dangerous, like a Stitch Face, a turnip that deals extremely high damage and knockback. In another major upset in 2022, Zane, the player who would go on to rank #1 in the world that year, was sent to the loser's bracket early by Peach player Wally at Super Smash Con. In that set, Wally would get unusually lucky with Peach's turnip pulls. In game 2, they would pull 3 Stitch Faces in a row, an outcome with odds so low that they border on absurd. But even then, those lucky pulls were only a small part of the victory. Wally still had to outplay Zane for the majority of the 2-game set, winning enough neutral exchanges to even get the opportunity to pull those turnips in the first place. Poker is a competitive game with a much higher luck component than Melee. A single hand can produce wildly unpredictable results, but as more hands are played, variance evens out, and the better player is expected to rise to the top. It's why you see professional poker players winning tournaments, and not random attendees who happen to just wander into the venue that day. These competitors are able to mitigate the luck factor by consistently making optimal decisions and winning over the long run. Now reduce the luck aspect to niche edge cases, and make decision making and frame perfect execution the primary factor of success. Welcome to Super Smash Bros. Melee. Despite how fast it looks from the outside, a single stock in Melee is made up of dozens of tiny interactions, neutral exchanges that players are constantly fighting to win. And when the win condition is taking 4 entire stocks across 2 to 3 games, even a small gap in skill can compound rapidly. Watch a top level player face an average one, and the difference is immediately obvious. The movement is cleaner, the punish game is sharper, and the decisions come faster. Yet, despite all of that, even the best players are still mortal.
It's just it! Rap Monster taking it 3-1 over the #1 ranked player, over the 2-time Genesis champion.
In many traditional sports, access to high-level competition is heavily gatekept. LeBron James didn't just wake up one day and enter a basketball tournament. He was identified as a prospect, recruited, drafted, and carefully filtered through a highly regulated system before ever stepping onto an NBA court. And while it's possible that somewhere out there, someone you've never heard of could beat LeBron in a game of pickup basketball, the structure of professional sports makes it almost impossible for that person to ever get the chance to prove it. But competitive fighting games are different. True to their arcade roots, where anyone with a quarter could step up to the cabinet, fighting games like Melee are built around open bracket tournaments. Show up, pay your entry fee, and you too can go toe-to-toe with the best players in the world, maybe even walking away with the trophy if you have the skills to do it. This then begs the question, how do we know who the best player is on any given day? The most accurate approach would be a full round-robin tournament, a format where everyone plays everyone else. In theory, that would give us the clearest picture of relative skill, but in practice, it'd be a logistical nightmare. With hundreds or even thousands of entrants, a format like that would be impossible to run. So instead, most major Melee tournaments rely on a double elimination bracket. The format is simple. Each player is assigned a seed, which directly determines their position in the bracket and the order of opponents they'll face, shaping their path through the tournament. From there, matches are played out, with competitors who suffer 2 losses being knocked out of the tournament. When one player remains, they are crowned the champion.
He has it this time, surely. It is enough to do it, and Zayn knocked me, your Supernova 2025 champion.
But for that system to be fair for players and entertaining for spectators, organizers need some way to approximate how strong each competitor is relative to the rest of the field. Otherwise, you could have a situation where the best players meet way too early in the bracket, skewing final placements and undermining the tournament's ability to showcase the best that it has to offer. Melee has no built-in score or ranking to measure how strong a player is. That's because skill isn't necessarily something we can simply compute. Rather, it's something we observe. But over the years, there have been many attempts to quantify skill, and perhaps the most influential model comes from physicist and chess master Arpad Elo. Elo's core insight was simple. Skill is not deterministic, it's probabilistic. Rather than thinking of skill as a fixed number, it's more useful to think of it as a range of possible performances, and one way to visualize that range is with the famous bell curve. On the far right of the curve are performances where a player is operating at their absolute peak. Perfect execution, perfect decisions, the kind of play that borders on task level precision. On the far left are performances well below a player's norm, misinputs, nerves, fatigue, bad matchups, or personal circumstances that prevent them from playing their best. But most of the time, a player performs somewhere in the middle. That center mass represents their average level of play on any given day, the version of them we're most likely to see. When 2 players compete, we are essentially using each player's individual bell curve to compute the odds. You can use statistical theory to do this, but I'll spare you the math, because the takeaway is much simpler. It boils down to this: the better player should win. But anything is possible. Each year, thousands of entrants show up to major tournaments across the world to compete in Melee. Yet despite the large player base and open format, only a very small group of players have ever been capable of winning a major tournament. There have even been eras where the best players were so far ahead of the rest of the playing field that they were seen as operating on a different level entirely. From roughly 2008 to 2015, 5 players stood above everyone else, a period now remembered as the 5 Gods era. For years, they were widely considered the only realistic candidates to win tournaments when in attendance, as the rest of the player base simply couldn't keep up with them. Melee in the modern day is arguably even more prone to this kind of dominance. Players like Zayn and Cody Schwab routinely tower over tournament brackets, making even Melee's top talent look hopeless in defeating them. Perhaps like the force of gravity, it's just the math at work. But every now and then, something will happen that goes against the odds. And it's in that unlikely scenario where a lower seed manages to defeat a higher seed that we get an upset.
That's it! That's it! Swedish beats Armada 2-1!
Now, not all upsets are created equal. At Apex 2015, PPMD entered the tournament seeded 6th, but would go on to win the entire event. It was a surprising result, and PPMD defeating Armada and Leffen, players who were seated above him, was definitely considered an upset, but it wasn't unthinkable. PPMD was one of the 5 gods of Melee, and he had beaten both Armada and Leffen before. While he may have not been the favorite going in, it wasn't unimaginable to consider him as a contender. Of the 1,000 entrants, he was still seated as the 6th best after all. But on much rarer occasions, Melee experiences something far more extraordinary. Moments where the odds don't just feel low, they feel non-existent. Cases where a relatively unassuming player manages to defeat Melee's very best. And when these upsets happen, they don't just change the bracket. They reshape Melee's narratives and redefine the culture around the game. Sometimes, they inspire players to keep pushing forward, while other times, they philosophically alter how people view skill. But most importantly, they remind us that even in a top-heavy game ruled by skill, nothing is ever guaranteed. Saturday, November 15th, 2014. It's the local Melee tournament in Edmonton, the capital of Alberta, Canada. The usual players show up, register, warm up. Everything starts out completely ordinary. That is, until a mysterious person enters the venue. They're wearing all black with a ski mask to conceal their identity. After approaching the tournament organizer, they slightly motion for a pen and write a single name on the registration sheet: FalcoMaster 3000. People are confused and anxious to see what exactly this mysterious figure is up to. The tournament begins, and FalcoMaster is queued up against a local Fox player. Picking Falco themselves, they proceed to decimate the Edmonton player, even taking opportunities to style on them.
What the fuck was that? Are we gonna see a 4-stock? Are we gonna see a 4-stock by the FalcoMaster? Oh.
After their victory, FalcoMaster simply turns to the stunned crowd and gives a simple thumbs up. They don't say a word, and they never do. Without uttering a sound for the entire duration of the tournament, FalcoMaster sweeps through their local talent. Set after set, FalcoMaster decimates each of the Edmonton players using a rotating cast of characters that allows them to showcase their skill and versatility. It's now Grand Finals. The entire Edmonton crowd watches as their local top player, Anjo, faces off against the masked stranger.
Oh, what a shine kill! Wow, what a power kill in the up man! Oh, and it's choking. Oh, what a shine kill!
And in the final moment, FalcoMaster closes it out with a perfectly placed up smash tipper. The crowd begins chanting, demanding the mask come off. They want to know who just defeated their entire scene. Instead, FalcoMaster refuses. They take their prize earnings and run off into the night. The next day, footage of the event is uploaded to YouTube on the Super Smash Bros. University channel. It spreads quickly, and across the Melee community, speculation explodes. Just who was FalcoMaster? Some players are proposed as candidates, but each working theory has holes. With no solidified answer in sight, the community starts to arrive at a different conclusion, one a bit more spiritual.
Some people think that he's the spirit of Melee. Some people think that he's the manifestation or the personification of FalcoMaster. Now, FalcoMaster for a day selected a single individual. But we don't really know. And I don't think anyone's going to find out. We don't even know if we're ever going to see him again.
Within Melee culture, the idea of a FalcoMaster comes from a random commentary exchange that devolved into a meme between legendary commentators Scar and Toph.
He's this ethereal being who just like, he doesn't exist, but he's also everyone. Basically, the idea is that you go to tournaments all the time, and like, you look at your bracket, and sometimes, like today, my bracket was literally Fox, Falco, Falco, Fox, Falco. Yeah. That was my bracket today. And so sometimes you want those kinds of pools, sometimes you just want all fast fallers and give me them. But you run the risk with the fast faller brackets that you're going to run into this being,
FalcoMaster.
FalcoMaster. And FalcoMaster just exists all the time, and it's just, you play against, you just enter a tournament set with this Falco who just goes by the name of like Ralph or Ron or something.
Shout out to both Ralph and Ron.
And like,
because these are real examples.
You don't really understand what's happening, but like, they're just doing basic standard Falco stuff, and you're losing. You can't navigate around the lasers. They hit you one time, they do 80% damage. So the point is that you never want to run into FalcoMaster.
The true identity of the player who attended the Edmonton local was never truly confirmed, but perhaps it was better that way, because with no singular face to put under the mask, FalcoMaster became the symbol for the spirit of an open bracket tournament, that even on your best day, you can never sleep on the competition, as there could be someone out there who you've never heard of that just happens to be playing out of their mind. The title is incredibly fitting because the idea is perhaps no better exemplified by Melee's signature glass cannon character, Falco. Sporting the perfect combo weight and a much shorter recovery compared to his space animal counterpart, Fox, Falco is widely thought of as one of the most easy to gimp and vulnerable characters in the game when in disadvantaged state. But ask any Melee player and they'll tell you that there's nothing scarier than playing a Falco who's on. When everything is working, Falco becomes one of the most oppressive characters in the game, making you feel like you've completely lost control of your character and shutting down your movement completely. Over the years, many players would attempt to don the title of FalcoMaster. Some even went as far as recreating the original getup from the Edmonton local. But the true spirit of FalcoMaster would lie dormant for years, waiting for the moment when Melee needed them most.
Oh my God! PBMC in the losers bracket! A big back here! Rest! Rest! It's over!
In modern Melee, Hungrybox stands as the last remaining member of the Five Gods still actively competing in tournaments. Today, he's widely seen as a pillar of the community, maintaining a dedicated following of fans who openly cheer for him. But it wasn't always like that, for there was a time where Hungrybox was one of Melee's biggest antagonists.
And Hungrybox closes it out. And
What
he is your big
killer.
house champion.
No pop-off this time. He's been sitting in that chair
for
game after game after game.
For so long.
During his rise to prominence in the early Five Gods era, Hungrybox was typically viewed as the weakest of the five, treated less like a threat and more like a chump check by his fellow gods.
Actually, HBox is he's the giver of free evos. He gave me a free evo, gave Armado a free evo.
Yep.
Thank you, HBox, for giving us free evos. I appreciate it.
One day, you'll give me a free evo too.
He'll get second at every evo for the rest of his life, and then you got to thank him for giving you a free evo.
Part of the lack of respect was due to the character he piloted, Jigglypuff, who is perhaps one of the most fascinating characters in Melee. On the surface, Jigglypuff seems weak. Her ground game is slow, her moves seem unassuming, and her lightweight and floaty fall speed make her incredibly easy to KO. But the minute Jigglypuff leaves the ground, she becomes a menacing threat. With 5 jumps, incredibly disjointed aerials, and the most versatile aerial mobility in Melee, Jigglypuff becomes a moving wall with the perfect toolkit to control space and dictate the pace of the game. And with no other character truly able to contest Puff's air game, her advantage only grows stronger off stage. Depending on the matchup and playstyle, Jigglypuff can either get in close and pressure the opponent with tightly spaced hitboxes, or disengage and force the opponent to come towards the Puff. Although the best Jigglypuff players are generally able to alternate between both playstyles, there are many players who argue that the optimal way to play Jigglypuff is through non-interactivity and defense, slowing the pace of the game entirely. Now, pair one of Melee's most defensive characters with Hungrybox, a player with unmatched patience and stamina, and what you get is a playstyle that's not only oppressive, but for a time, dominated the game. It took Hungrybox time and plenty of losses to solidify his game plan, but once he did, Hungrybox would go on a reign of terror. To beat Hungrybox, you'd need to outlast him in a battle of attrition while navigating around his signature clutch factor. In do-or-die situations where Jigglypuff falls behind and needs to make something happen, she possesses perhaps the single greatest comeback mechanic in Melee.
Nobody gets hit. He gets that could be it.
By pressing down and B, Puff falls asleep, leaving herself completely vulnerable for several seconds. But if the tiny hitbox at the very start of the move connects, the opponent is instantly blown up, often resulting in a one-hit KO. The move is extremely risky when thrown out recklessly, but in the hands of a skilled Jigglypuff player, it can be comboed into, turning that risk into a guaranteed stock. By 2016, Hungrybox had surpassed most of the gods and become a regular contender for best in the world, trailing only Armada. Armada would hold on to the top spot for another year, but by the end of 2017, Hungrybox would finally overtake him, cementing himself as the best Melee player in the world. It was an incredible achievement, but not everyone was happy about it, because to a portion of the community, Hungrybox and Jigglypuff represented something that they found deeply uncomfortable about the game of Melee. To some, the idea of a player taking one of Melee's most offensive characters and piloting them to the top was blasphemous. Melee is a game that should reward the player with an aggressive and execution-heavy playstyle, like 20XX foretold, not a floaty character built around defense. Now layer in that Hungrybox's playstyle wasn't just effective, but also notoriously frustrating to go up against. What you have is a perfect recipe to construct a villain. For Hungrybox's detractors, the big question going into each tournament wouldn't be who can win, but would instead be who could beat Hungrybox and save the tournament. For an ordinary player, the surmounting pressure to be toppled from the peak would be incredibly straining on the mental. Add on to that a chunk of the community hates your guts, and their pressure spikes, but Hungrybox embraced his role as an antagonistic force.
I'm pretty fed up with the bullshit. So I'm gonna do whatever the fuck I want to do. I'll play this game for 20 more years, if that's what it takes to be the best player in the world. Jeer me all you want. Please.
The one player who could consistently contend with Hungrybox, Armada, was keeping it very competitive for the first half of 2018, but halfway through the year, Armada would deliver news that would shock the Melee scene. He would announce a retirement from Melee altogether, citing that he no longer felt the motivation needed to continually fight for the top spot.
If it's changed from something I'm like incredibly excited about, and this is what I want to do, looking forward to each tournament, until like basically feeling sick and not want to do it at all, then I feel like it's gone way too far, way too long.
With Hungrybox's greatest challenger now gone, it was up to the rest of the field to figure out a way to defeat him. And although there were a few top players capable of doing so, one by one, their ability to challenge Hungrybox was slowly fading. Mewtwo King would stop competing in Melee and focus more on streaming. Mango was on a downswing, unable to close out a set against the same player he once called free. Plup would also announce a break from competing in early 2019, specifically citing burnout from constantly having to go against Hungrybox and Jigglypuff, and perhaps Hungrybox's biggest rival, Leffen, began to devolve into Melee doomerism. In our now infamous 2018 tier list, Leffen ranked Jigglypuff above Fox entirely, but more telling than the placement itself was an additional metric that he included, character difficulty. Jigglypuff scored the lowest on the list, a not so subtle dig at Hungrybox as the implication was clear. Hungrybox wasn't just winning, he was being carried by his character, and by choosing to play the easiest, most offensive character, he was also killing the hype of Melee and dooming its future.
It is a reality, right? That like, if all I wanted to do was just win, you know, maybe if Melee, the prize pots were so insanely huge, right, that I could just win one tournament and then forever be set for life, like Dota. Yeah, I would probably pick Puff. You know what? I'll play the most boring character for that much money. I don't want to do that. I don't think playing Puff and killing the game that brought me so much, which I do legitimately think it would.
The discourse around Hungrybox and Jigglypuff began to boil, with players arguing back and forth if Hungrybox's playstyle was fair game or actively hurting the community. And although most competitors were able to leave their feelings at the setup, for others, the lines between Hungrybox the player and Hungrybox the person began to blur.
So obviously I have had, you know, an interesting, not cordial relationship with Hungrybox. I have been pretty upfront about the fact that I hate him as a person.
In the most infamous incident, a spectator crossed that line entirely and resorted to violence, hurling a crab at Hungrybox after he defeated Mango at Pound 2019.
Who the fuck threw this? Who threw this at me? Fuck off, dude. Fuck you. Why would you throw something? Right in my fucking face. You know how hard I work on here?
Perhaps in hindsight, whether Jigglypuff was truly killing Melee is a question that would be answered very differently today, but in 2019, one thing was undeniable. The discourse around Jigglypuff was devolving into chaos, and pessimism had taken hold. Melee needed a reminder of its competitive spirit. It needed proof that no mountain was truly unclimbable, and it was in this moment the spirit of Melee awakened, not in the form of a top player, but a dark knight. Having only started attending tournaments in 2014, Albert was relatively new to the scene. His tournament attendance was mainly confined to his home region of Central Texas, and he would almost never venture out to major tournaments outside his home state. To the greater Melee community, Albert was invisible, just another Falco player to add to the infinite list of them. But for those in the know, Albert was anything but an ordinary Falco. In his short time playing, he was consistently pushing top players in his local scene to the limit and slowly climbing the Austin ranks. But to go head to head with the greatest player in the world, that's a completely different feat. Low Tier City 7, a major tournament held in Arlington, Texas. In addition to the local Texas players, multiple top players from outside have come to try and take the home title, including Hungrybox, who was seeded first and projected to win the entire event. It's a winner's round 2 of the top 64 bracket. Hungrybox is yet to drop even a single game. By all metrics, it's looking like an easy sweep into top 8, but on the other side of the bracket was an unassuming Falco player who had unexpectedly fought their way into a match against Hungrybox. To the average onlooker, the odds were non-existent. If Melee's best players struggled to beat Hungrybox, then Albert's chances were effectively zero. Expecting a wash, the two are directed to play off-stream, away from the spotlight, and on a random site setup away from the crowd, the set begins. There's no existing footage of the first 4 games. All that is known from the few players there to witness the set in person is that Albert managed to take Hungrybox all the way to Game 5. Only that final game was captured, filmed on a shaky phone by a Texas spectator who went live partway through the match. The footage is rough and the camera shakes, sometimes even panning away from the gameplay, but the spectators huddled around the TV are too locked into care. Word on the floor has spread. Albert had taken Hungrybox to Game 5, and you can feel the intensity coming from the growing crowd. For most of the game, Hungrybox is holding a slight lead. Albert trolls behind, but never panics. There's a few close calls, but Albert is keeping it competitive. He's utilizing lasers to stop Hungrybox from simply stalling him out, and then going in with aerials and intense shield pressure when he sees an opening. But a puff-favored trade leaves Albert on his final stock, while Hungrybox still has 2. Most players in this exact situation fall apart here. The opportunity for greatness is right within reach, but without experience, there's just not enough grit to take it all the way. By all means, this is where the better player should win. But Albert doesn't flinch. Down on his final stock, something possesses Albert, and it's in this final moment with everything on the line where we finally see the long-awaited return of FalcoMaster. The crowd erupts into a frenzy and swarms Albert, while Hungrybox quietly slips away in defeat. Word spreads instantly. A relatively unknown Falco player had just slain the Puff Dragon. Ironically, Hungrybox would go on to win the tournament from the loser's bracket. He would even defeat Albert in a rematch, ending Albert's run at a respectable 5th place. Because remember, in the long run, the better player will win. But what Albert did was bigger than a placement. At the height of Doomerism, amid claims that Jigglypuff was killing Melee, an unknown player stepped forward and proved that even the most oppressive playstyle could still be overcome. Albert inspired a generation not to give up, but to push forward. And while Hungrybox would still finish the year of 2019 as the #1 player, the landscape of Melee would begin to drastically change in the 2020s. With the release of Slippy making Melee more accessible than ever, there was a rapid increase in both the skill floor and the skill ceiling. And when in-person tournaments returned in 2021, Hungrybox would enter the modern era of Melee as the most vulnerable he had ever been since the early days of his career. Melee's new rising cast of top talent began overtaking him for the top spot in Melee, and for the first time in ages, Hungrybox began to drop sets to the wider player base, who were beginning to dissect and adapt to his defensive playstyle. Hungrybox was still dangerous and could never be counted out, but he was far from untouchable. Yet, while other players of his time began to step away from the scene amidst the growing competition, Hungrybox doubled down on Melee and continued to push even further, both on and off the setup. With his transition from an unstoppable god to a bit of an underdog himself, the wider Melee community finally began to appreciate HBox's hunger to continue forward, in spite of Melee being harder than ever. Through content creation, tournament organization, and sponsorship-driven prize pools, in a strange twist of fate, the player once accused of killing Melee is now one of its strongest pillars. These days, much of the past hate towards Hungrybox is seen as excessive in hindsight. Perhaps like a forest regrowing after a fire, Melee simply needed a force to restore it to equilibrium. A simple reminder to us all that no matter how impossible things may seem, show up to the setup with enough skill, and anything can happen.
FalcoMaster, what do you have to say about your recent victory? Excellent.
Mario Party is a game designed for fun and chaos. Its minigames are simple, accessible, and built with an anyone-can-win philosophy in mind. A highly skilled player can dominate nearly every minigame and still lose due to bad luck at the very end. Such an outcome isn't that uncommon, and there's a reason you don't see high-stakes Mario Party tournaments. It's a game for casual players to enjoy when they're looking for light fun, not to consistently reward skill. Out of the box, Super Smash Bros. Melee isn't all that different. Items and wacky stages introduce a ton of randomness and variance that can result in unexpected outcomes. Sakurai and HAL Laboratories had the casual player top of mind when designing Melee, but with the foresight that some individuals may prefer some mechanics over others, the developers introduced customization options into the game. Think items are unfair? Go ahead and turn them off. Find a certain stage frustrating to play on? There's plenty others to choose from. Over the years, the Melee community has taken advantage of these customization options, perhaps way more than Sakurai would have anticipated. Competitive players have spent time carefully tuning the game's rule set to minimize the elements of Melee that they feel contradicts the values of a skill-based game. Items are disabled, the stage list is trimmed to a small pool of relatively neutral stages, and there's a strict 4-stock setup with an 8-minute timer. But not everything is as simple as a menu toggle. Melee was developed in just 13 months, an astonishing feat given its polish. Play the game casually, and you might never notice anything unusual, but when pushed to its competitive limits, certain quirks begin to surface. No game engine is ever perfect, and with such a rushed development cycle, there were bound to be some overlooked oddities. Something as fundamental to competitive Melee like wave dashing is technically an exploit of the game's physics system. Air dodging into the ground to create a sliding effect was never explicitly designed as a core movement mechanic, and yet, it's a mechanic that grants the player incredible movement options, making Melee much more dynamic and expressive. By all means, it's a net positive. However, not every unintended mechanic is viewed so favorably. Peach's side B, known as the Peach Bomber, is an offensive attack that can be used to bounce into an opponent. With an incredibly telegraphed animation and long-lasting end lag, it's generally seen as a bad move, but it has a secondary purpose. If done correctly, the move can be used to repeatedly bounce on and off a wall, gaining a slight vertical height each time. So, in theory, a strategy that a Peach player could employ would be to take a slight percent lead, retreat to a position that the opponent's character cannot contest, and then simply wait out the clock until the timer hits 0. This technique is known as stalling. For certain players, perhaps watching their opponents struggle to interact for 8 minutes is incredibly satisfying, but for a majority of the player base, many would argue that this goes against the spirit of competition. Melee is a game that should reward technical ability, promote player interaction, and of course, be fun to play and watch. Stalling breaks these principles, as it's rewarding a player's refusal to interact with the opponent. Even the game designers anticipated this problem. If time runs out and stocks are tied, the game will enter sudden death, a high percent mode where one hit ends the game. And if players still refuse to engage, bombs begin raining from the sky until someone is eliminated. This solution will force an outcome, but many in the competitive community still see this for what it is, a winner selected by random chance. As such, sudden death mode is not used in competitive play. In scenarios like this, where the game engine can't adequately resolve a competitive issue, is where tournament organizers step in. In order to compete in a tournament, players agree to external rules, restrictions that go beyond what the game itself can enforce. Just as you can't launch your controller at an opponent, you can't use Peach's Bomber to stall indefinitely. These rules are not just etiquette. If you choose to break them, you will be disqualified from the tournament, and potentially even face social backlash for attempting to win in a way that the community deems degenerate. But this is where things become a bit complicated. What counts as a degenerate strategy, and what counts as valid competitive play? Sometimes, these calls are obvious. There's few people that will defend a strategy like stalling, but other times, the distinction is not so clear, and often, it isn't until a single, high-profile moment forces the issue that the community is compelled to decide.
That's it. Yep. He's he looks like he's about to cry, dude.
Oh my god, he got the dash attack grab again.
Oh, and here comes the wobble. The skill cam. Oh, no.
Wobbling may perhaps be the most contested mechanic in the history of Melee. It's incredibly polarizing, with portions of the community seeing it as completely against the principles of Melee, while others staunchly defending its inclusion in the game. But in order to understand wobbling, we first need to understand why such a strange mechanic even exists in the first place. A common archetype in competitive fighting games is known as the puppet character. This type of fighter typically involves the player commandeering two characters at once. Typically, there's one main character and a secondary character that acts as a puppet of the first, hence the name. The exact implementation varies from game to game, but one thing is consistent. Having two controllable fighters creates unusual techniques and strategies that the rest of the cast don't have access to. Melee's take on the puppet archetype comes in the form of the Ice Climbers. The player directly controls the lead climber, often referred to as Popo or Sopo when alone, while the second climber, typically referred to as Nana, has varying behavior depending on the state of the climbers. When the two are together, the second climber will mirror the inputs of the first with a slight delay. This effectively allows the player to control two characters in sync. When paired together, the climbers are powerful. They have strong ground movement, can rack up damage incredibly quickly, and hit hard. Having a partner nearby also makes them difficult to grab or combo, since the second climber can break strings by striking the opponent. But when separated, everything changes.
Oh no! Oh my god, is that it? Oh my god, he has to mash more! Mash more! Nana, do something! Nana, do something! Please!
If the secondary climber is not in sync with the main climber, they become AI controlled. While there's nuance to how the AI behaves, the short version is this. Alone, the secondary climber is highly exploitable. It struggles with basic defensive and recovery options, making it incredibly easy to KO. Losing the secondary climber does not cost a stock. A stock is only dependent on the health of the lead climber, but without their partner, Sopo loses access to the most threatening aspects of the character's toolkit and is dramatically weaker, often being compared to a low-tier character. So, the Ice Climber's game plan is clear. Stay together and protect your partner. Alone, the climbers are weak, but as a duo, they unlock some of the most unique techniques in the game. And this is where we meet wobbling. It all stems from how the grab mechanic works in Melee. When a player lands a grab, both characters enter a unique state. The offensive player, the one who secured the grab, has two primary options. They can either press a direction to throw the opponent, or they can press the A button to perform a pummel. Meanwhile, the player being grabbed is stuck in grab hit stun, and is tasked with mashing inputs in an attempt to break free. The higher the percent, the more inputs are required to escape. One key part of this minigame is that when the pummel animation actually connects and the hitbox lands, the grabbed player cannot escape. The only window to mash out is in the gap between pummel hits. This is where the exploit begins. If attacks are delivered faster than a player can physically mash out within that window, the defender can be trapped indefinitely in the grab state. For example, if one player grabs an opponent and a second player repeatedly hits the grabbed character with Pikachu's rapid jab, the defender cannot escape. The required mash inputs simply cannot be physically completed by a human before the next hit connects. The result is an infinite. The grabbed player remains stuck in grab hit stun until they are either released or launched away. Under normal circumstances, this isn't a major problem. Melee is primarily played as a 1v1 game, and the developers intentionally designed pummel animations to be relatively slow. That means in standard play, the mash window between pummels is quite wide and more than enough for a defender to reasonably escape. Without a teammate applying additional rapid hits, this quirk in the grab system cannot be exploited. But this comes with one very important exception that the game designers didn't anticipate. Ice climbers can perform a mechanic known as desync. This technique takes advantage of the slight delay between the two climbers, and it allows them to perform different actions while still being controlled by the same player. If the Ice Climber duo lands a grab and then are desynced, the lead climber can hold the grab and pummel, while the partner climber performs a separate attack, such as a tilt. Each hit from the moves resets the grab hit stun, and if the climbers perform the correct rhythm of alternating hits, the window for the opponent to mash out becomes too small to break free. Said differently, this creates a true infinite, a guaranteed lost stock from a single grab. This technique would come to be known as wobbling, and it has been incredibly controversial since its discovery in the early days of competition.
A lot of people hate this, but hey.
Because Melee is a grassroots scene with no formal governing body, the legality of wobbling varied from tournament to tournament in the early days. Although each organizer had to make their own call, the majority saw the technique as a bannable offense. That was at least until EVO 2013. At the time, EVO was the largest fighting game tournament in the world. and for Melee, it was a defining moment. The event helped reintroduce the game as a legitimate esport to a wider gaming audience.
Right now, he read that roll!
Within the FGC, infinite combos aren't always as controversial, and in a game like Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, they arguably define how the game is played. Part of the fun is being able to trap your opponent and execute an inescapable sequence that leaves them with no choice but to pray you'll mess up. If you find yourself trapped in one, well, you shouldn't have been caught in the first place. The burden is on the defender to avoid that situation entirely. With EVO being a primarily fighting game tournament, the organizers chose to make wobbling legal in Melee's rule set, so if the EVO tournament organizers saw no problem with an infinite being utilized in competitive Melee, why might parts of the Melee community feel different? While Melee is famous for its explosive combo game, an equally important and often overlooked aspect of the game is its defensive counterplay. Due to the percent-based knockback system of the game, most interactions are situational, requiring the player to stay on their toes and adapt to various positions that they can find themselves in. And when placed in disadvantage, Melee characters are rarely helpless. The game is filled with techniques that allow a player to fight their way out of a combo. Good Melee players don't just know how to extend combos, they know how to escape them too. But with an infinite like wobbling, defensive tactics are useless. Once you've been caught in the wobble, it becomes a pure execution test for the Ice Climbers player. There's no technique, stage, or counterplay that can get you out of the wobble. In comparison to pulling off infinite combos in a game like Marvel, wobbling is relatively easy. Once set up, it simply requires pushing the A button in a specific rhythm around 100 beats per minute. This is more than doable for a human and can be learned in a short amount of time with high execution consistency. So when wobbling was legal at EVO, how did things play out? Ice Climber player Wobbles, who the technique is coined after, would incorporate wobbling into his play and make it all the way to Grand Finals, defeating several of the game's top players along the way, but he would ultimately finish second after he was defeated by Mango in a bracket reset.
And Wobbles is gonna go down 3-1 Mango.
Despite wobbling's power, Mango was able to overcome it by repeatedly separating the climbers and avoiding getting grabbed altogether, because even with an incredibly oppressive mechanic like wobbling, Ice Climbers are far from unbeatable. In fact, they occupy one of the strangest positions in Melee's metagame. Look at any Melee tier list and Ices are not at the top. The duo is considered viable, but far from dominant. Many of Melee's top tier characters possess tools that are incredibly efficient at separating the duo and exploiting the secondary climber's AI. The challenge of Ice Climbers isn't performing the wobble, it's keeping your partner alive long enough to land the grab and do it in the first place. As a result, Ice Climbers are considered unfavorable against much of the relevant cast, with certain players going as far as labeling specific matchups as nearly unwinnable. Wobble's second place finish at EVO was historic, but it arguably remains the highest placement an Ice Climbers player has ever achieved at a super major, and to this day, no Ice Climbers player has won one. With Ice Climbers widely considered a flawed character, and the largest fighting game tournament in the world labeling wobbling as legitimate, other major tournaments would follow suit, a decision that would carry significant downstream effects. Once legalized, wobbling quickly became the central pillar of the Ice Climbers game plan. For many Icy mains, it wasn't just an option, it fundamentally defined how the character was meant to be played. The objective? Get a grab. And if playing against the Ice Climbers, don't get grabbed. When in the heat of a nerve-wracking tournament environment, avoiding a grab is easier said than done, and once you've been caught, skill becomes irrelevant. Whether you are the best player in the world or have never touched a GameCube controller, the outcome is the same. Watch the cutscene of your character getting pummeled. With such a punishing option in the toolkit, the numerous micro-decisions that are usually necessary to take a stock all of a sudden become much smaller.
Most Ice Climber players, I don't want to like name names or anything, but like a lot of them, they pretty much like mastered a certain aspect of the game, which is like grabbing, or like one basic setup in a grab, like blizzard grab, or just tricks to negate grabs, and then you can kill people at zero. If you master that, you can upset players more often because of like smaller sample sizes of fighting. Like kind of like how in Smash 4 there's a sample size of like 2 stocks, and in Melee there's a sample size of 4 stocks. The smaller the sample size, the easier it is to like cause an upset because there's less exchanges. That's taken a step further when you have wobbling, because you could literally win a turn match with 4 exchanges in some situations.
Perhaps such a playstyle wasn't inherently reshaping the tier list, but it was notorious for evoking emotional responses from frustrated players. To critics, wobbling was antithetical to how Melee should be played, with some even going as far to protest mid-set. But for the majority of the player base, ice climbers were still seen as flawed enough such that wobbling wasn't a huge issue, and the debate would go on to be relatively silent for some years. That is, until around 2018. Around this era, a notable surge of ice climbers players began to emerge, each employing strategies around wobbling to make deep bracket runs and top player upsets. Wobbling became a more and more common staple of competitive play, and the discourse around it would re-emerge in full force. On one side of the aisle were players like Chudat, who saw wobbling as a vital tool that kept ice climbers relevant in a brutal melee meta, that with the game containing such poignant top tiers, refusing to see wobbling as a legitimate strategy was just a skill issue.
On Twitter today, I think Axe and King are very vocal on Twitter about banning wobbling. So it's no surprise that these guys are going to be super vocal about wobbling, because they always lose to wobbling. King has like the worst spacing on shield against ice climbers. It's a punish, but like all of the top 8 characters of the game all have like 0 to death punishes if you get like 1 or 2 reads.
His case was perhaps best illustrated at DreamHack Atlanta 2017 against Hungrybox. Chudat opened the set strong, going up 2 games.
The crowd's going nuts. Everyone is behind Chudat right now in this crowd. Hungrybox is in hostile territory. He can't believe what's happening.
On his back foot, Hungrybox would tighten up and win the next 2 games back to back, leading to a game 5. In this 8-minute set, Hungrybox employed a strategy where he would immediately take out Nana and then position himself in the air where Sopo could not meaningfully contest him. With no threat to getting wobbled, he could then run out the clock. The strategy was incredibly effective, and with only 2 minutes left on the clock, Chudat would perform a drastic move.
He's doing it. This is the all-in. All the chips on the table. Yeah. All the chips on the table.
Oh my god. I didn't think I'd ever see it. The intentional,
was actually the
tactical suicide to get out of that.
In his eyes, wobbling was the only win condition in such a lopsided matchup, so much so that he would willingly sacrifice a full stock to regain the ability to do it. But on the other side of the aisle stood players like Axe, a beloved competitor and one of the most vocal advocates for a wobbling ban.
You guys gotta ban wobbling. What's happening? What's happening? How do people not see it?
Axe openly admitted that his record against ice climbers players wasn't stellar, but his argument wasn't about personal results or even about tournament results in general. It was about principles.
For people that wobble, if I'm losing to them, what I really want to do is figure it out. Like, I want to beat these guys with or without wobbling. I think wobbling should be banned because I think that's what's best for the Smash community as a whole. I'm thinking about what's going on at the levels below, like, me and Army and Bananas and all that. I'm thinking more of like, if you're going to a tournament, right? You make it a couple of rounds in bracket, you're doing really good, right? And then if you just getting wobbled, it just ruins everything. And it's not just getting wobbled, it's just the fact that it's an unblockable infinite that you can do anywhere on this with zero defense, like 0 defense option, no counterplay. You can't DI, you can't do mix-ups, you can't play melee. You're not playing melee at that point. You see like things are really skewed when it comes to ice climbers that are just extremely good at getting wobbles. And I just wish that more melee could be played because ice climbers, have a lot more to them. Have a lot more to them than just like basing their entire game around getting a wobble. It's actually pretty sad that ice climbers players are kind of forced to play this way.
The philosophical divide became clear. Logically speaking, wobbling wasn't breaking the metagame of melee, but emotionally, many players felt that wobbling was not indicative of skill in melee, making it frustrating to play against. And in a 20-year-old grassroots game that lives and dies on players being passionate enough to continue, perhaps those feelings couldn't be ignored. But with wobbling only becoming more and more prevalent at high-profile events, many of the once impartial players began to lean towards the side of intervention. On February 8th, 2019, the Tennessee Smash community would take the first leap by announcing a formal wobbling ban in several Tennessee cities. This decision would have a downstream effect, as other regions also began to trial wobbling bans and see how it would affect the scene. Perhaps most notably, GOML 2019 and Battle of BC3, 2 high-profile Canadian tournaments would follow suit by banning wobbling at their annual iterations. At this point, the bans were seen as incredibly experimental. TOs were unsure how such a move would affect their tournaments, and ruled in favor of a trial period before making any hard decisions. But after one set that finally pushed the needle, the discourse would reach its boiling point. August 2019, the summer of Smash. Fresh off of a historic Smash Summit 8 victory and ranked 3rd in the world, Axe entered Super Smash Con as the 2nd seed in a super major boasting over 850 competitors. By all accounts, this should be another strong showing for Axe. It's early in the bracket, only the first round of the second phase of pools. If everything goes as planned, Axe will go against Chillin' Dude, who he has a solid record against. But after a surprise result in round 1 pools, Axe discovers that his next match will instead be a best of 3 against a relatively unknown Ice Climber player named Pudgy Panda. Pudgy Panda was a good player. He had solid performances in the tri-state area and a handful of respectable wins over high-level competitors, but he had never cracked the Melee Top 100, and standing across from a player who was currently in contention for best in the world, most onlookers didn't expect the set to be all that close. That was, at least, until the set started. Pikachu vs Ice Climbers is widely considered one of the Electric Mouse's worst matchups. Being small and stubby, Pikachu needs to get in close to fight, and when the opponent can delete your stock off of a single grab, the punish ratio becomes brutally skewed. Pikachu's grab game is also central to his combo and edge guard sequences, but when there are 2 climbers at play, landing a safe grab becomes significantly harder. An early wobble on stock 2 sets the tone. Axe fights from behind, but the deficit proves to be too steep, and after a missed back throw into up smash, he's caught again, with the wobble sealing game 1 for Pudgy Panda. Axe wouldn't be a top player if he didn't have answers to Ice Climbers. Being incredibly skilled, he can utilize multiple characters and has even relied on them to be able to beat the climbers at other tournaments. So he switches to Falco, a character with a much better matchup against the climbers and one that Axe has been known for being incredibly proficient with. Axe starts off game 2 aggressive and strong. He's able to avoid getting wobbled entirely and closes out the game with a fresh stock to boot. The score is now 1-1, and Axe is looking much more confident, but without even realizing it, he's made a fatal mistake before game 3 even begins. These days, hop on a game of Slippy or a setup running the modern UCF patch, and characters will both spawn at neutral positions, but before modders chose to intervene, spawn points were determined by the port that a controller is plugged into. Place yourself in the wrong port and you could put yourself at a major disadvantage at the beginning of the game. To avoid getting caught by the gimmick, you would either have to memorize the port and stage combinations or request a neutral start where the players position themselves and don't begin playing until a certain point of the timer. On Dreamland, port 2 spawns on the left platform, port 1 spawns center stage, Axis port 2, Pudgy Panda is port 1, a prime position for Ice Climbers to shark from below. Without realizing the position he's put himself in, Axe drops down from the platform as soon as the game begins, only to find himself in the hands of the climbers, and in less than a second, he's grabbed. His first stock is gone, setting the tone for the rest of the set. As the second stock plays out, Axe does a good job of separating the climbers at first, but gets caught while trying to target switch between the two. Now down to 2 stocks, things are starting to look grim, but Axe doesn't fold. He locks in, and is able to tie the stock count while coming out relatively unscathed. In the 3rd stock, he's able to land a massive combo that leads to an edge guard. Axe now has the lead, and is looking poised to run away with the game, until he jumps right into a meaty down smash. It's now last stock. Both players are feeling the pressure. Pudgy Panda drops a grab. Axe's movement tightens, looking stiff and not fluid like usual. Then one poorly spaced down air places Axe between both climbers. Pudgy Panda lands a jab into one final grab, and Axe is caught in a wobble. Pudgy Panda takes his eyes off the TV and looks down at his controller to focus on the rhythm. There's no real reason to look at the TV, as there's nothing Axe can do. Deflated, Axe watches his character get pummeled to high percent. Although normally a player known for his positive attitude, you can see the visible frustration that has been compounding the entire set. Falco is launched into the blast zone, and the set is over. Pudgy Panda had made the upset over Axe 2-1. News of the outcome would begin to spread quickly. Usually such a big upset generates excitement, but this time, the news was a lot more polarizing. Pudgy Panda had done nothing wrong. They had won a fair game of Melee under the current rule set at the tournament, but even they would later tweet that the win didn't feel entirely earned or satisfying. As the tournament progressed, Pudgy Panda would go on to lose all his remaining sets, both Ice Climber dittos. Meanwhile, Axe would battle his way into the top 16 on the loser's side, where he would eventually fall to Chudat in a painfully familiar scenario. For many, what they had just witnessed was too egregious. After watching such a skilled player lose to an unknown player with a controversial strategy, many prominent figures in the community had finally seen enough. On August 13th, just 2 days after the weekend of Super Smash Con, Juggle Guy head tournament organizer of the prestigious Big House Tournament series, would release a blog post that announced wobbling would be banned at the next installment of the event. In his blog post explaining the decision, Jungle Guy would list 3 key reasons. 1. Wobbling leads to miserable play patterns and tournament experiences. 2. It doesn't fit the skill set criteria that we subjectively deem valuable to test in a tournament match. And 3. It's what the majority of in-person tournament attendees prefer right now. And with an influential tournament series like the Big House finally taking the big step, others followed. Tournament by tournament, region by region, within months, wobbling would go on to become a universally banned technique from competitive Melee. For Ice Climber players who had built their game plans around it, the decision felt devastating. Some switched characters, while others slowly stepped away from the scene altogether. But over time, something interesting began to happen, and perhaps Axe was correct in that without wobbling, Ice Climbers would be unchained from the mechanic and begin to exhibit some unexplored potential. In the modern age of Melee, a new breed of Ice Climber players would emerge. With no wobbling to rely on, these players would be forced to push deeper than before. Handoffs are another way the Ice Climbers can devastatingly punish their opponent. However, they are much more situational and technically demanding to pull off. With throw speeds being weight dependent, handoffs require precise timing and character-specific knowledge. They weren't something an average player could master in a single session. With wobbling legal, there was no reason to go for the more difficult handoffs other than for style. But with wobbling gone, Ice Climber players were forced to utilize the more flashy and difficult handoffs. Gradually, Ice Climbers regained traction in the meta. The Melee Top 100 would see plenty of Ice Climbers return to the Top 100, with a few even being able to break into the Top 10. And many of the characters' greatest tournament runs would come from the post-wobbling ban era. Even matchups that were previously thought to be unwinnable with wobbling legal would finally be overcome. Top Ice Climber player Nikki would go on to defeat Hungrybox's winning streak against Ice Climbers, and he did it without wobbling. With the new playstyle, even some of the most vocal proponents of a wobbling ban would come around to the climbers.
If I walked off of wobbling, and overall, the reception was pretty good. You know, mostly people were okay with it because obviously it was nasty to look at. We got it banned. People now come back and say, oh wow, thank you. Ices are actually pretty sick now. It's kind of sick to look at Ices. I root for Ices. I like Ices. It was just the wobbling thing.
Every character in Melee has critics. Every strategy has someone who finds it frustrating to play against. The challenge of a grassroots scene is to be able to come together and identify what the community wants to reward. Whether you agree with the wobbling ban or not, the Melee community chose to move forward without it. Newer players today will never have to experience the feeling of watching their character trapped in an unavoidable wobble. At least, not in the same way. The days of wobbling are a bygone era, only to be remembered by veterans of the game who were around when the boundaries of competitive play were not as defined. Some may look back and wonder how something like wobbling even lasted as long as it did. Newer players might view wobbling the same way we now view the absurdity of the early Melee stage list. Perhaps the new blood is quick to dismiss such times as archaic, but others might say that living through such times brews wisdom, invaluable experience that paved the way for everyone else. Because before we dismiss the past as primitive, it's worth taking a step back and thinking about what we owe the players who came before us. There's perhaps no player rivalry in Melee history with a greater cultural impact than Leffen vs Chillin. Scroll through VGBootCamp, one of Smash's most comprehensive tournament archives, and their set stands as the most viewed Melee match on the channel, sitting comfortably at over 1 million views. The amount of people who have seen this set is roughly the same as the population of Delaware. This is not a high-stakes grand finals set of a tournament. There is no life-changing cash prize on the line. Instead, it's a mere exhibition match. So how did such a relatively low-stakes set cement itself as a monument in Smash Bros. History? Understanding Leffen vs Chillin requires setting some context into the two players at the heart of it. Chillin, formerly known as ChillinDude829, is about as old school of a Melee player as it gets. He's been playing since the birth of the competitive scene in 2002. Being one of the earliest top-level Fox players in the game, many of the modern-day bread-and-butter combos can be credited to the early pioneering of Chillin. In Melee's golden age, Chillin was a tried-and-true top player. Look at any bracket from the MLG era, and you'll often find his name deep in top 8s. But perhaps his most famous claim to fame was when he became the first player ever to defeat Ken, early Melee's undisputed champion, otherwise known as the King of Smash.
Up smash.
As Nintendo released Brawl in 2008, Melee's presence at major esports events began to shrink, ushering in what the community now calls the Dark Ages, but the game never truly disappeared. Players continued playing Melee well past the new iterations, and as the 2010s began to come around the corner, a new challenger would enter the competition, but this time, they would come from across the ocean. Hailing from Sweden, Leffen began entering tournaments in the early 2010s and quickly rose through the European ranks. In a region dominated by Armada, one of the 5 gods of Melee and the only international player capable of consistently challenging the American gods, Leffen would make a name for himself as a rising star, placing well in European and overseas events. But he would also make a name for himself through other means, namely his arrogance and outspoken personality. That persona would catch up with him in 2013, when he was officially banned from attending a large collective of European tournaments. In the announcement, Armada and other European community leaders released detailed documentation outlining patterns of toxic behavior. This collection of documentation would later become infamously known as evidence.zip. The ban, however, was temporary, and when Leffen was allowed to return in 2014 under conditions of improved conduct, he would make his grand return more skilled than ever.
Hungry box. Oh! That's it! Leffen jumps out of his chair!
One by one, he began taking sets off of the 5 gods of Melee, something none of the rest of the field was capable of doing. By the end of the year, he was ranked as the 6th best player in the world, and would be coined the God Slayer for his ability to contest with them. Such feats were unprecedented, and with that prowess came ego. Leffen's skill was undeniable, but his reputation remained incredibly controversial. Having such a forward personality led many to brandish Leffen as Melee's villain, a title he was more than happy to wear if it meant beating your favorite player. This brings us to Apex 2015. Melee has just seen a huge boost of attention thanks to its resurgence at EVO and the viral Smash Bros. Documentary. The esports craze is in full swing, and with Smash in the spotlight, many teams and brands are eager to get their hands on talent. As official rosters are announced, many of the signed players are old school veterans who had notable features in the documentary. One of those inclusions was Chillin, who would sign with Team Curse and later be absorbed into Team Liquid. Leffen, who himself was a free agent, was unhappy with sponsors choosing to value legacy players over the current rankings, and he let his opinions be known. In a now infamous tweet, he called out Chillin's sponsor directly, stating that they had made a terrible roster selection. Chillin would respond, and after some escalation, Leffen would proceed to call Chillin a has-been. Chillin then fired back with words that would define the rivalry. Respect your elders. From there, a challenge was made, an exhibition money match at Apex. The stakes, $100, and the rights to don the neutral color fox that both players utilized in tournament. Leffen agreed, and the stage was set for the Salty Suite. Fans were invested, and as the date drew nearer, Leffen would only double down on his lack of respect for the veteran player, dismissing the need to waste any energy on the spectacle.
And it's gonna be 5-0. That's how it's gonna be. I really wish he would have more of a shot so I could set him up as a goal, and I practiced really hard. I wish that was the case. $100 is not a lot of money, but as it is now, $100 compared to a 15,000 or more prize pot, why should I waste my time practicing against him? I'm gonna beat him anyway. He takes a game? Sure, he takes a game. He loses his color by the end of the day anyway. Like, I don't care about Chillin. Everyone's just, oh, I hope you beat Leffen. No one's ever saying, oh, I hope you win Apex, Chillin. You wonder why? Both me and he knows that he could study me all day, and maybe in the worst case scenario he wins, but he has no shot at winning Apex whatsoever, and he will probably never have a shot at winning a major, considering how long he's playing and won absolutely nothing. But that's just how it is. I'm happy that you give me the money, but please practice for Apex instead of me.
But having been forged in some of the rowdiest days of Smash, Chillin himself was no stranger to talking smack, and in response, Chillin would unveil what is perhaps one of the most iconic pieces of Melee media ever created. The level of effort put into the trash talk here was unprecedented. Chillin had won the hearts of the people, and by the time the Salty Suite arrived, he had legions of fans rooting for him to take down Leffen. Now on stage, the two are given the opportunity to make an opening statement.
I think this guy talks a lot, and it's about time for him to learn some respect.
Leffen, what do you have to say to Chillin before we start?
I'm sorry.
All right, let's just play. I can bother this fraud, and let's move on, all right?
Let's play some melee.
Game 1 starts promising. Chillin takes the first stock and builds an early lead. But once Leffen finds his footing, the skill gap becomes obvious. Leffen is just converting much harder, and Chillin loses steam. Not completely flustered yet, Chillin takes Leffen to Fountain of Dreams for Game 2. Despite an early self-destruct, Chillin manages to keep it competitive. By the last stock, it's looking like Chillin might even take it, and the crowd is getting hype for him. It's now a last hit situation. At kill percent, Chillin manages to land a dash attack. By all means, this is an easy confirm into an up smash to win the game. But in the heat of the moment, Chillin completely whiffs the finisher. The only thing launched is Chillin into a premature pop-off. Leffen gives Chillin plenty of opportunities to take the stock in bad scraps, but at this point, Chillin's nerves have got the best of him. After narrowly avoiding death, Leffen steals Game 2, and from here, there was no coming back. For the rest of the exhibition, Leffen would never lose the lead. Perhaps if Leffen was playing his A game, it could still be considered respectable, but Leffen was not. In fact, he was intentionally throwing out scrubby options to openly disrespect Chillin, and when those bad options would catch Chillin off guard, he'd openly taunt him, smirking and laughing maniacally for all to see. Chillin was definitely the underdog, but being a very skilled and legendary player in his own right, many people did expect a competitive set. What they got instead was the complete opposite. The final score was 5-0, and when prompted for his thoughts on what just transpired, Chillin would once again leave another trademark in the landscape of Smash and gaming culture.
Chillin, you have anything you want to say to the people?
Might be.
But the old guard wasn't done yet. After watching his fellow old school legend be defeated in such a brutal way, Mango would hop onto the stage to defend Chillin's honor.
This man, okay, I went to his country and he beat me. Okay. But you come to my country and you beat my man 5-0. If we play in bracket, we're gonna put 1,000 on it. 1,000.
Yo!
The two would meet the next day in winners semis of the bracket, and in a fairly lopsided set, Leffen would take the win 3-1. In one weekend, two of Melee's most old school heroes were defeated by the new blood. Such decisive victories were a massive statement for Melee's villain.
Is there anything to say? Is there really? Respect your elders.
But the aftermath of the Salty Suite was surprisingly positive. The buzz generated around the spectacle would garner massive attention to Melee, arguably being one of the rare Melee moments to transcend outside of the world of Smash and into greater culture. The set is remembered fondly, and although there have been attempts, the magic of that Salty Suite has pretty much never been replicated since. Ironically enough, the actual player beef was short-lived. After about only a year, Leffen would grant Chillin the rights to start using his original color again. The two would even take a friendly photo together at Big House, and take opportunities to lean into the meme through live performances of the diss track.
Oh god, cancel one looking at you fox. Take this match 4 and lose it 5-4 stocks.
On his personal Twitch stream reacting to the money match, Chillin would even go as far as creating an edited version of the match to prank his viewers into thinking he'd actually landed that up smash and won the second game.
Oh no, not like this. Wow, alright, let's go, 1-1. 1-1. Fuck yeah, Chillin, dude.
It was a hilarious stream moment for his viewers, but it also presented a strange alternate timeline. There's a world where Chillin actually landed that up smash, and perhaps even managed to win the entire set. In that timeline, one of Smash's biggest meme moments would instead be one of its greatest underdog stories. A tried and true legend of the game teaches a cocky punk what it means to be a competitor. That's not the timeline we live in. Chillin got 5-0'd, and Leffen would leave Apex more or less vindicated in his beliefs that everyone else was washed and he was the future. Maybe Leffen was right, or perhaps Leffen did need to learn some respect, and it just wasn't Chillin who would be teaching it to him. Ludwig would emerge onto the scene around 2007. Instead of migrating to Brawl, he would continue to play Melee during its dark ages. Having been inspired by technical Fox players like Eggs and Silent Wolf, Ludwig would work to develop his own style. He would quickly develop a reputation for his flashy tech skill, which was showcased in a series of tech skill videos, but his play was more than just high APM, and over time, he would rise through the ranks in his home turf of the incredibly stacked SoCal scene. In just a few years, Ludwig would establish himself as one of the best players in the era. In 2011, he was arguably one of the best in the world, with his defining moment coming at the very first iteration of the Big House, where he would defeat the local Midwest players before taking the tournament over his fellow SoCal player S2J. At a time when bragging rights were the only currency Melee really had, it wasn't uncommon for top players to be boastful about their skill. But Ludwig would remain humble, citing hard work and a dedicated effort to improve as the driving force behind his results.
When you observe players or you're a fan of a player, you're pretty much only exposed to their YouTube videos. So in the public eye, people are only as good as their YouTube videos are. So when people say that I was super technical, now I'm super smart too, whatever, which is kind of dumb because it was a really slow, gradual process where I got just a little bit better at the game. I still wouldn't even say that I'm smart. I'm pretty fucking dumb compared to Mango, Dr. PP Armada, the really top tier players who actually are way better at fighting games than me. But for a long time, my tech skill carried me. Like in SoCal, basically, when I was first going to tournaments, I just got carried by tech skill because I practiced a lot and I got pretty technical, and I was more technical in my area. So I wouldn't have to think to beat people. I'd mostly just try my hardest and combo really well, and I'd win. But I hit a wall and I couldn't win anymore, and then I had to learn how to adapt to people and get smarter at the game.
2011 and 2012 would mark the peak of Ludwig's career as a tournament competitor. As Melee entered its renaissance in the mid-2010s, Ludwig would begin leaning into a community figure role, stepping back from competition to invest more of his time as a personality in the scene. His laid-back demeanor, paired with a deep knowledge of the game, would make him a fan-favorite commentator, one who was a regular invite to commentary lineups at some of the biggest events of the year. Although his competitive focus had faded, Ludwig was still a threat when he showed up to a tournament, but with an ever-growing pool of rising stars and hungry new players, it seemed like his glory days as a competitor were mostly behind him. Ludwig himself would even acknowledge the drop in performance, jokingly referring to himself as washed in his Twitter bio. Having shifted his energy elsewhere, it seemed like Ludwig, once considered one of the best in the world, was satisfied to settle down and enjoy from the sidelines. But Melee had different plans for him. There was still a villain on the loose who needed to be humbled, and the ever-moving clock of karma had finally ticked. Ludwig would be invited to commentate Game Tyrant Expo, a super major held in Salt Lake City. His job was to be on the mic, but being a competitor at heart, he would opt to enter the singles bracket as well. With nearly all of Melee's top players in attendance, he would be seeded 36th, expected to make it into the top 48 phase of the bracket, but not much further. Also in attendance is Leffen, seeded 4th and among the favorites to win the entire event. Pools play would get underway, and Leffen would cruise through the pool finals without dropping a single game, nothing out of the ordinary. To advance on the winner's side, he is expected to face Bladewise, a highly skilled Peach player who had been consistently ranked in the top 40s for the past several years. But then something unexpected happens. When it's time to play, Leffen's opponent on stage is not a Peach. Bladewise had been sent to losers by Ludwig. The two were both seasoned veterans with sets going back to the Dark Ages, and while Bladewise would go on to be the higher ranked player, on this day, Ludwig would get the better of him with an upset. On paper, this is a gift. Leffen's bracket had just gotten easier, as by the numbers, his next opponent was a weaker one. By all means, this should be a clean 2-0 into the winner's side of top 48. And after the first stock opens with a near 0 to death on Ludwig, it's looking like it's headed exactly in that direction. But rather than spiraling, Ludwig turns up the jets and begins to fire back.
European
wait a minute! Ooh, Oscar moving with him though. He's like, look, man.
He's been around the block. You know what I mean? This is not his first rodeo. Not his first top player.
He's like, yeah, you got 2 sponsorships, but you didn't win Big House, dude.
The two would go blow for most of the set. Leffen would have the more optimized punish game, but with flashy movement and big callouts, Ludwig would keep it competitive the entire time. It wouldn't be until the final stock that Leffen would clean it up. In the player cam, Leffen hypes himself up and takes a deep breath, an unusual reaction against the player this early in the tournament. He had won the game, but the set had clearly been more stressful than he had anticipated. Ludwig selects Pokemon Stadium and Game 2 begins. Leffen's movement starts to look a bit off, while Ludwig looks completely in his element, taking every opportunity to be stylish and aggressive. For the first time, Leffen falls behind, letting out sighs in the player cam as he tries to collect himself. Ludwig's playstyle is far from optimal, but his unique and unorthodox movement would catch Leffen off guard time and time again. After continuously keeping Leffen on his toes through the final stock, Ludwig would chase him across Pokemon Stadium into a running shine up smash, sealing Game 2 for the commentator.
And
Game
Oscar
3.
on the board!
Run up, shine, up smash.
When Game 3 begins on Battlefield, Ludwig immediately goes on the offense and refuses to let Leffen breathe. And without taking a single hit, he cleans up the first stock in a way that feels deeply reminiscent of old school Melee. The thought of an upset begins to circulate throughout the crowd. Having seen Leffen come back from similar situations before, the commentators urge viewers not to count him out.
Easy, but
Oscar probably won't commentate later today.
Please don't count Leffen out.
Oh, yeah.
But after Ludwig reads and answers every one of Leffen's recovery options on the second stock, the possibility becomes undeniable. Ludwig isn't just winning, he seems to have a complete download on Leffen's play. Call out after call out, Leffen's movement looks shakier than ever.
That I think Leffen wants to go for. It's like his reads have 100%.
He hella knows where Leffen's going.
Just blocking the up smash. Weak hit, air.
Okay.
Wow, perfectly spaced.
Oh.
Leffen flubbing.
Yeah.
He's just. Oh.
Oscar just has like a.
He's got the reads right now.
Yeah, man. He just like he's
I see
catching.
spaghetti, honestly, from both players right now, but Oscar Spaghetti is just the
Oh, what?
The crowd comes alive, hungry for the upset. With a smile, Ludwig tells them to calm down. He isn't quite finished yet. Down to his last stock, the defeat is visible in Leffen's play. The typically oppressive Fox player looks like they're struggling to do anything but try and survive. And after one more unorthodox edgeguard sequence,
It's over. Damn.
restocked Game 3.
Damn.
Lavage.
Lavage. That was nuts.
Washed up SSBM commentator.
Wow. Yeah. I don't think he's washed, bro. He was looking clean if he's washed.
despite having just defeated one of the best players in the world in a match nobody gave him a shot in, Ludwig's reaction would be surprisingly understated. He simply smiles in mild disbelief as his friends pop off around him. But despite his humbleness, what he had done was massive. He had avenged his fallen old heads and taught the young blood a lesson about what it means to be a Melee legend. News would spread almost instantly, with fans rejoicing and creating memes. Reacting to the tournament set, Leffen would take to Twitter with a series of messages noting that it was the worst he had ever played in a tournament setting and that he'd probably never hear the end of it.
You know, I feel bad for my man Leffen because I know he's going to get it on social media.
Dude, but
he's going to get it.
But we've seen Leffen do this
He's going to
before.
get it again.
But
he already got it from
We've
Oscar.
seen him.
Ludwig's reaction on Twitter was a single word: cool. In 2020, Melee Stats would host March Madness, the greatest upsets of all time, a collection of 64 upsets from across Melee's entire history, pitted against each other in a bracket format with fans voting for the winner. When the dust settled, Ludwig taking it over the Godslayer Leffen would be crowned as the greatest Melee upset of all time. And after finally being humbled, perhaps Leffen had to learn some respect after all. In June of 2022, Chillin would tragically suffer a stroke that would land him in emergency care and needing heart surgery. After Chillin's brother set up a GoFundMe to help cover the enormous medical costs, the Melee community and the broader gaming world would rally together, raising money and spreading awareness for the cause. Leffen would spread the word in solidarity, and in honor of Chillin, would vow not to use the vanilla fox skin at his next competition. It was a small gesture, but one that had signified that he was finally showing some respect to his elders. The better player always wins, except when they don't. And in those moments, something shifts. An upset doesn't just change a bracket, it makes you feel like the game itself is bigger than anyone in it. But those moments are rarer than they feel in the heat of them, because like gravity, there's an invisible force quietly working to restore order. In probability theory, there's a mathematical law known as the law of large numbers. It states that in any scenario with a variable outcome, the more times you repeat it, the closer your result will inch toward what the odds predict. Randomness doesn't disappear, but over time, it gets drowned out. What's left standing are the numbers doing exactly what they're supposed to do. Walk into a casino, and every game on the floor is built around one quiet guarantee: the house always wins. Not on every hand, not on every spin, but over time, always. Each game is engineered to look achievable, but with an edge quietly baked in favor of the house. Across millions of bets, the house's return is virtually inevitable. It's not magic, it's just the math. Melee is not so different. For every occasional upset, thousands of players have fallen to the Melee elite. and thousands more never even earned themselves the opportunity to meet in bracket. It's almost ironic that a game designed to be approachable would reveal itself to be so brutal and unforgiving. Only a rare few have been able to rise to the top of Melee, and once there, they don't often leave. But occasionally, someone still beats the house. Maybe it's luck, maybe it's divine intervention, maybe the odds aren't what we thought they were, or maybe it's pure unchanneled skill that finally gets its moment to shine. Whatever the case may be, moments like these remind us why thousands still choose to spectate and compete in this 25-year-old video game. They remind us of the value proposition of Melee. Melee has no explicit social classes, no exclusive leagues, no luck of the draw of being born with the perfect genetics or the perfect upbringing to prime you for the big stage. Open brackets are for everyone. All you need is a controller and the willingness to put yourself on the line. Maybe it never amounts to much, a fun hobby, a way to pass the time. Maybe it can be painful, losses that replay in your head long after the venue is cleared. But maybe, just maybe, you can do something great. Because even if it's only for a short moment, maybe you can go against the odds and beat the house.